They dragged the young man through the village square just after sunrise. Adu's hands were tied with rope, his face swollen from the beating. His knees were scraped, his tunic torn. Behind him, the king's guards walked like shadows, silent and strong, with spears in their hands and no pity in their eyes. The people of the village watched from behind their doors and trees. Some covered their mouths, some looked away, others just stared, silent. At the front of the crowd stood the king, King Obade, his robe sweeping the dust, his face like stone. He didn't blink. He didn't move. His gold crown caught the sun, making him look almost godlike. Next to him, standing barefoot in a plain white cloth, was his daughter Kalima. Her face was pale, her eyes wet, but she didn't cry. Not now. Her lips trembled, but she stood still, even though her heart screamed inside her chest. "You touched my daughter," the king said, his voice loud and cold. "You will die for it." Adu looked up, breathing hard. His mouth was bleeding, but even then, he didn't beg. He didn't drop his head. "I loved her," he said. That was all. The crowd went quiet. Even the birds stopped singing. In the early mornings of Nusumba village, before the sun grew too hot, the land came alive with work. Birds called from trees, goats wandered freely, and farmers walked into the fields with hoes on their shoulders. Among them was a young man named Adu. He wasn't rich, he didn't own many things. But he had 2 strong hands, a patch of good land, and a sick mother who depended on him. Adu lived in a small mud house near the edge of the village. His home had a low thatched roof, and inside, a bamboo mat lay beside his mother's sleeping place. Most days, Adu woke before the roosters. He would wash his face with water from the clay pot outside, say a short prayer to the sky, then walk barefoot to the field with quiet determination. He grew cassava, yams, and groundnuts. He worked under the sun with sweat on his back and dust on his arms. He sang to himself as he dug. He sang old work songs his father once taught him. He didn't complain. Not even when his clothes tore or when the rain failed. One morning, while Adu was digging up yams, he felt someone watching him. He paused, wiped the sweat from his brow, and looked around. By the tall bush near the mango tree stood a young woman. She had a light brown wrapper tied around her waist and a shawl over her head. Her eyes were wide and curious. "You're not from here," Adu said, resting on his hoe. "No, I'm not," she replied with a shy smile. "I came to look for herbs." He nodded and turned back to his work, but she didn't leave. "I saw you yesterday," she said softly. "You were planting cassava." He looked up again. "You've been watching me?" "Just once," she said quickly. "I was passing by." She took a step closer. "What's your name?" "Adu," he replied. "And you?" She hesitated. "Kali," she said. It was only part of her name. A lie, but not a full one. "Well, Kali, I have some herbs growing near the back of my garden. You can take a few." "Thank you," she said, and smiled again. That day, she left after taking what she needed. But the next day, she returned. And the day after that, too. They began to talk more. She sat on a tree root while he worked. She asked about planting. He showed her how deep to place a yam. Sometimes he gave her small fruits, and she brought him water in a gourd. It became a quiet friendship, but Adu was not foolish. One day, he looked at her more closely. Her wrapper was fine, the cloth woven from silk cotton. Her braids were neat, with golden beads at the ends. Her fingers had never touched soil. He tilted his head and said, "You don't talk like a village girl. You walk too straight, and your hands no blisters." She looked down at her feet, unsure what to say. "You're from the palace, aren't you?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm Kalima, the king's daughter." Adu took a step back. His hands tightened around the handle of his hoe. "Why would a king's daughter come to my farm?" "Because no one talks to me there," she said. "No one listens. Everyone bows, but no one sees me." Adu didn't speak for a long time. He looked at her, really looked. Not as a princess, but as a girl sitting under a tree with dust on her feet. She looked free and afraid at the same time. "I don't want trouble," Adu said carefully. "I won't bring you trouble," she replied. So they kept meeting, always in the early mornings When the sun was still low and the air was cool, Kalima brought roasted groundnuts and dried meat. Adu shared his boiled yams and told her village stories. She laughed at his jokes. He liked how she listened. Sometimes they sat without saying much, just watching the sky or listening to the wind move through the trees. One day, Kalima said, "Do you ever wonder what's beyond those hills?" Adu nodded. "I think of it every morning. I want to go there someday," she whispered. "Then go." "I can't," she said. "Not yet." He didn't ask why. He just sat beside her, close enough to feel her shoulder against his. But things were not as quiet as they seemed. People in the village began to notice. Someone had seen Kalima walking toward Adu's farm. Someone had heard laughter near the tree. People are always watching even when you think they are not. Back at the palace, the king was planning Kalima's future. He spoke to chiefs and other royals. One of them, a prince from the north, had land, cattle, and warriors. He would be a fine husband, the king thought. A powerful match. Kalima listened in silence during those talks. But her heart began to shake. That evening, she went to Adu with sorrow in her eyes. She wore a simple wrap and had removed the beads from her braids. "My father is preparing to marry me off," she said. Adu looked down. His hands were dirty from the day's work. He clenched them quietly. "He will never let me be with someone like you." "I know," he said. "But I had to tell you." The sun was going down. They stood there, between the trees, with the sky burning orange behind them. Neither moved. "I won't stop loving you," she whispered. Adu didn't speak. He reached for her hand. For a moment, they stood like that. Not prince or farmer. Not king's daughter or poor man, just two hearts caught between worlds. After that day, Kalima and Adu began meeting in secret. The mango tree near the edge of Adu's field became their place. Its large branches made a wide shade, and the leaves whispered softly when the wind passed. The tree stood far from the village paths, so no one went near it unless they had reason. Every morning before the sun was fully up, Kalima left the palace through the back wall. There was a small space between the stones where the bricks were weak. She slipped through, barefoot, carrying a bundle of food in cloth. She would walk through tall grass, her heart beating fast with each step. If the guards saw her, if someone from the village spoke, everything could fall apart. But still, she went. Adu would already be at the tree. He always sat waiting, back straight, hands resting on his knees. His farming tools were nearby, ready for work, but he didn't start until she arrived. They shared roasted groundnuts, dried cassava, boiled eggs, or smoked fish. Sometimes they just shared silence. Kalima spoke of life in the palace. The women there only smiled when the king walked by. How her stepmothers barely spoke to her. How her brothers were kind but always busy with war training or council meetings. She felt like a bird in a cage, even in a palace made of gold. Adu told her about his farm, about his sick mother, about how hard it was to find medicine. He had no brothers, no sisters. Just him and the land, and now her. One morning, while Kalima sat plaiting long grasses into a bracelet, Adu turned to her and asked, "Why me?" She looked up. "What do you mean?" "You could have anyone. A rich man, a warrior, even a prince." Kalima smiled. "They all talk too much. You listen. You don't try to impress me. You speak truth." Adu looked away, brushing the dirt with his fingers. "Truth doesn't feed people." "No," she said gently, "but it feeds the heart." That same week, the king made an announcement. He called his family and council together in the great hut lined with animal skins and gold carvings. Drums were beaten to call everyone into the royal space. Kalima stood among them, her face blank, her arms crossed tight across her chest. The king stood tall and proud, his crown catching the torchlight. He raised his hand, and silence fell. "My daughter Kalima will marry Prince Luda of the northern hills," he said. "The wedding will be in 6 moons." People clapped and cheered. Some bowed. Kalima said nothing. She returned to her room that night and lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She thought of Adu's face, of his rough hands, of the way he looked at her like she was not a princess, but a person. The next morning, she didn't go to the mango tree. Adu waited, as he always did. The food stayed in the cloth by his side. The wind moved through the leaves, but she did not come. He returned the next morning. Still, she didn't show. On the third morning, she came. Her eyes were red from crying. Her hair was tied in a rush. She walked quickly, sat beside him, and didn't speak for a long time. Adu sat beside her in silence. Finally, she said, "He's marrying me to a prince." Adu clenched his jaw. "When?" "In 6 moons." They sat with their backs against the tree. Their shoulders touched. "I don't want him," she whispered. "I know," he said. "But I'm scared." "I know that too." They stayed there for a long time. Time moved slowly when they were together. The pain was sharp, but it was quiet too. That evening, back at the palace, Kalima sat with her brother, Prince Cato. He was older than her, soft-spoken, with thoughtful eyes. Of all her brothers, he was the only one who truly listened. "I met someone," she said. He raised his eyebrows but said nothing. "He's not a prince, not a noble, just a man." "Does he treat you well?" "He sees me, not just my name." Cato sighed and rubbed his forehead. "If father finds out—" "I know," she said. "That's why no one must know, not even the others." Cato nodded slowly. "Be careful, Kalima." "I always am." But she wasn't careful enough. A week later, one of the palace servants was fetching water from the stream when she saw something strange. She noticed Kalima's figure slipping into the trees near the farm. Curiosity got the better of her. She followed from a distance and watched as Kalima sat under the mango tree beside a man with dusty clothes. They laughed. They touched hands. The servant returned and said nothing that night. But the next day, she spoke to another servant, and that servant spoke to a guard. And by the following moon, the whisper had reached the ears of the king's most trusted advisor. Still, Kalima and Adu met as usual. She brought a small drum one day and sang a village song she had heard when she was a child. Adu smiled and clapped softly in rhythm. Another day, Adu gave her a wooden hairpin he had carved himself. It had no jewels, no gold, just a smooth, curved shape with her name scratched into the side. She wore it proudly. "Do you ever wish we could run away?" she asked one morning. "Yes," he said, without hesitation. "Would you go with me?" Adu didn't answer right away. He stared at the land, at the crops growing quietly in the field. "I would," he said, "but we'd need a place to run to." "I don't care where," she whispered. "As long as I'm not someone else's wife." He looked at her. "Then we must be ready." She squeezed his hand. Neither of them saw the figure hiding in the trees watching. Kalima's heart beat faster each day. Not because of love, though that still lived inside her, but because fear had taken root as well. Fear that someone had seen them. Fear that her father would find out. Fear that her dreams, her plans, even Adu, could be taken away. She tried to hide it. She smiled when she walked through the palace halls. She nodded politely to her stepmothers and sat still during council meals. But her eyes always drifted toward the window, toward the edge of the forest, toward the mango tree. Meanwhile, Adu worked harder on the farm. He expanded his rows of cassava and yams, waking earlier, sweating more. He wasn't just working for himself now. He was working for a future one he didn't fully believe could come true, but one he had to try for. They still met. Not every day anymore. Just twice a week. Kalima couldn't risk being seen too often. She had begun covering her face with a scarf when she left the palace. She wore old village wrappers and walked barefoot so she looked like a servant girl. But it was already too late. The king's advisor, Chief Moro, had eyes everywhere. He trusted no one, not even the king's sons. When he heard whispers from the guards, he didn't go to the king right away. He decided to see for himself. One morning, just before the rooster crowed, Chief Moro followed Kalima. He dressed in the plain clothes of a hunter and kept to the shadows. She didn't see him. When she reached the tree, Adu was already waiting. She ran to him and held him tight. They didn't see the figure behind the bush, watching, listening. Moro returned to the palace with fire in his heart. He didn't waste time. He walked straight to the king's chambers, past the guards, past the dozing servants, and knocked hard on the royal door. The king, still half asleep, opened the door with a scowl. "Who disturbs my sleep?" "It is urgent, my king." "Speak, then." Your daughter, Moro said slowly, has been meeting with a common farmer, a man of the soil, a poor nobody. The king's eyes narrowed. You lie. I saw it with my own eyes. She meets him under the mango tree near the far field. They touch, they speak softly. I believe this has been going on for moons. King Obade stepped back. He said nothing at first. Then he sat down slowly, as if the weight of the news was too heavy. She has shamed me, he whispered. My king, I advise we act quickly, quietly. Obade nodded. Bring me the farmer, alive. That same night, 2 guards left the palace with spears in hand. They moved quietly, like hunting leopards. Adu was in his home, feeding his mother. She had been coughing badly that week, too weak to stand. He wiped her mouth gently and gave her warm water mixed with honey. He didn't hear them approach. The door flew open with a crash. By order of the king, one guard shouted. Adu barely had time to react before they grabbed him. His mother screamed, her voice cracking with fear. What did he do? She cried. He's done nothing wrong. They didn't answer. One guard struck Adu behind the knees, forcing him down. They tied his hands behind his back with thick rope. I didn't run, Adu said. You didn't need to do this. Silence, the taller guard barked. As they dragged him away, the neighbors came out of their huts. Some gasped. Others whispered. No one moved to help. Kalima was woken by shouting. A servant came running into her room, breathless. They've taken him! The guards! Adu! She stood up so fast she knocked over her water pot. Where? They're taking him to the square. She didn't wait. She grabbed her shawl, threw it over her nightdress, and ran barefoot across the palace yard, past the confused guards, past the kitchens and the drums. By the time she reached the village square, a crowd had already gathered. Adu was on his knees, his hands tied, his shirt torn. His face was bruised. Blood ran from a cut above his brow. King Obade stood tall before him, robes swirling in the wind. Kalima pushed through the people. Father, stop! The crowd turned. She stood in the middle of the square, hair wild, face pale, shaking with fury. You hurt him, you! Silence, the king roared. You don't get to silence me now, she shouted. You say you are a king, then act like one. What did he do but love me? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Obade's face turned red with rage. You shame this house. No, she said, her voice calm now. You do. The king looked down at Adu. Do you deny what she says? Adu raised his bruised face. I love her, he said simply. And I did nothing wrong. Obade turned to the guards. Put him in the pit. Kalima stepped forward. If he goes, I go. Then you will both suffer, the king said coldly. And with a sharp wave of his hand, the guards dragged Adu away. Kalima stood alone in the square, the crowd silent around her. Her hands were clenched. Her heart burned. This was no longer just a secret love. It was a war. The prison pit behind the palace was not deep, but it was cruel. It was a dry hole carved into the earth, 6 feet down and just wide enough for a grown man to sit with his knees tight to his chest. At night, the wind brought cold that bit into the bones. In the day, the sun beat down from above, and there was no shade. That was where Adu was kept. His hands were no longer tied, but the bruises from the beating stayed. The rope had cut into his skin. The guards gave him little food, only maize porridge in a cracked bowl. No blanket, no mat, just dirt. Adu didn't cry out, not once. He sat in the dark, back against the rough wall, eyes open. He listened to the sound of guards changing shifts, of birds flying overhead, of distant drums, but mostly he listened for her. Kalima had not seen him since the day they took him away. The king had locked her in her chambers. Her door was guarded at all hours. Her windows were watched. She was allowed to walk only within the palace courtyard and speak only to the king's wives. Even her brother, Prince Cato, was told to stay away. But Kalima was not like her stepmothers. She did not break in silence. She waited, and she planned. 2 days after Adu was taken, Cato found her sitting in the palace garden, alone. He walked up quietly and sat beside her. They won't let you see him, he said. I know, she replied. He's alive, but not well. Where is he? The pit. She clenched her fists. I spoke to father, Cato said softly. He won't change his mind. He says Adu must be made an example. An example of what? Loving me? Cato didn't answer. Kalima turned to him. Will you help me? He hesitated. I will not fight, father, but I will not betray you either. That's not enough, she said. Not anymore. That night, Kalima found a way. She waited until the third night watch, when the guard outside her door grew sleepy. She waited until the wind picked up and the torches outside the hall flickered low. She opened her window. She had tied bed sheets together. She dropped them gently down the palace wall and climbed barefoot, heart pounding in her ears. She ran, keeping low through the bushes, the stars her only light. She moved like she had done many times before when meeting Adwanli this time. She was not running toward love. She was running toward pain. The guards near the pit had moved to warm themselves by the fire. She crept around the back, where the rocks were loose. Adu, she whispered. From below, a weak voice answered. Kalima? She dropped to her knees. I'm here. Adu looked up from the hole. His face was swollen. His shirt was torn and stained with red earth. Her eyes filled with tears. What have they done to you? I'm still here, he said, his voice thin. She reached down, but the pit was too deep. I'll come back for you, she said. I swear. He nodded. Be careful. But she wasn't careful enough. Behind her, a torch flared. She turned and saw Chief Moro, his face twisted with fury. You disgrace yourself again, he growled. Sneaking to a prisoner in the night? Kalima stepped in front of the pit. Touch him, and I'll scream. I'll wake the whole palace. You think your cries will save him? I think they will shame you. Moro paused. He did not like noise. He did not like witnesses. He lowered the torch slightly. You cannot stop the wedding. The prince from the north arrives in 3 moons. Kalima didn't blink. Let him come. I won't marry him. You'll obey your father. No, she said. I'll fight him if I must. Moro's eyes narrowed. Then you are no longer a daughter of this house. She raised her chin. Then I will build a new one. He stared at her a moment longer, then turned away. Go back before the guards see you. She did not move. She waited until he disappeared into the darkness. Then she turned back to the pit. I'll come back, she whispered again. With a plan. Adu didn't stop her this time. The next day, Kalima went to Cato again. I need a horse, she said. He stared at her. To run? Number, to ride to the old healer in the hills, the one who helped father during the pox. She knows herbs. She knows secrets. Cato frowned. You're going to beg her for a way to fight this? I'm going to ask her for a cure, Kalima said. Not for the body, for the chain that holds me here. You really love him, Cato said. With all I am. That night, Cato helped her. He led her to the back stables where the youngest horse, a brown mare named Kifa, was kept. He gave her a small bag with dried meat, water, and a warm shawl. She mounted the horse quickly. Kalima, he said. If father finds out, then let him, she said. She kicked gently, and Kifa began to run. The palace gates grew small behind her. The night air hit her face. And for the first time in days, Kalima felt like she was breathing again. In the pit, Adu closed his eyes and dreamed of green hills. Kalima rode hard. The sky was dark and low with clouds, and the road ahead twisted through hills and scrubland. She had only a small bag of food, a leather pouch of water, and the shawl Cato had given her. Her hands clutched the reins, knuckles white with cold and fear. She had never left the kingdom on her own before. She had never slept outside the walls of the palace. But she did not look back. By dawn, she reached the edge of the forest that curved up into the hills. The path grew narrow, stones biting at the horse's hooves. She dismounted and walked beside Kifa, leading her up the rocky trail. There were stories about the woman who lived here, Mama Duma, the old healer. Some said she spoke to snakes. Some said she knew how to call rain or steal memories. Kalima didn't know what to believe. All she knew was that when her father once lay dying from the pox, Mama Duma came, whispered over a bowl of herbs, and the king rose 3 days later. Kalima reached the small hut just as the sun touched the sky. It was built from clay and sticks, half hidden in the hill. Smoke curled from the chimney. A wide mat lay outside the door, covered in shells and dried plants. A bird sat in a wooden cage, silent and still. Kalima hesitated. Then she stepped forward and knocked once. The door creaked open on its own. "Enter," came a voice from inside, low, dry, and strong. Kalima stepped in. The room smelled of roots and ash. Dried leaves hung from the ceiling. In the corner sat Mama Duma. Her hair was white as sand. Her eyes were sharp, though one was clouded. She wore a robe of dark cloth, and around her neck hung a necklace of carved teeth. "Child of the king," she said without looking up. "You walk with a heart full of fire." Kalima knelt. "I need help. I know why you've come." "Sit." Kalima sat cross-legged on the mat. "You seek freedom," Mama Duma said, "but freedom has a cost. I'll pay it.